Hi everyone, I'm Scott, back again with another set of recommendations from years past. I'm picking up where I left off with the last video, recommendations from the year 2011. The last film I talked about was the dark drama The Beaver, that was directed by Jodie Foster and starred her and Mel Gibson. And I'd like to continue on with one of the very best movies that came out that year, Margin Call. Margin Call is a drama set in the world of finance. It is a fictionalized version of something that could have happened right before the big financial meltdown of 2008, when we have a bunch of guys basically who are dealing with commodities and various products that are offered by, these sort of intangible, abstract commodity products, find out that they're actually worthless, and they attempt to sell them all to other people really quickly and make a bunch of money so that they aren't left holding the bag with these worthless things. It's rather complicated, a rather complicated scenario just in terms of understanding what these things are that are could be worth something but actually aren't. They aren't really physical products. They're a combination of bad mortgages and other things like that. It's just it's all very abstract, and only people who are really sort of up on their on their knowledge of such things really are capable of understanding it. There's some occasions which the characters explain exactly what's happened in very basic terms that are really sort of inappropriate given the world that the characters inhabit. If this was a David Mamet film, they wouldn't bother to explain these things so clearly and basically to the audience. They would just bury you in vernacular and leave you to fend for themselves. But aside from that little quibble, I really like this movie a lot. It was directed by J.C. Chandor, who went on to do one of the very best movies that I've seen so far this year, which is the one with Oscar Isaac and Jessica Chastain, A Most Violent Year. Yes, A Most Violent Year. One of the best films of the year so far, and this one was one of the best movies I saw of that year. Paul Bettany, Kevin Spacey, Zachary Quinto, Jeremy Irons, Demi Moore, really, really great cast. Like the movie a heck of a lot. Now, for a big change of pace, a rom-com called Crazy Stupid Love. I'm not altogether on board with rom-coms in general just because the stakes are so low, but occasionally you get a really good one. This one was co-directed and written by Glenn Ficarra and John Requa, who also did a movie I talked about a couple of videos back called I Love You, Philip Morris. That was from 2010. This movie got a much wider audience, thankfully. Steve Carell and Julianne Moore are a divorced couple. Steve Carell is basically out trying to get back into his groove in dating, which he's not really good at. He's socially awkward, and he ends up meeting Ryan Gosling, who's a total player and manages to bag a new woman every night, and so he sort of takes Steve Carell under his wing and coaches him. Meanwhile, Gosling meets Emma Stone and strikes up a romance with her, but would feel bad about treating her the same way as all the other women he meets throughout the year. So there's some good stuff going on there. Also, there's some drama involving Steve Carell's junior high school son, who's in love with a high school girl played by Annalee Tipton, and there's some comedy there. Also, Kevin Bacon is in this movie. She's a guy who's interested in Julianne Moore now that she's separated from Steve Carell, and everything comes together in a really hilarious fashion in one of the scenes in the second half of the film. Really, really well written movie. Great ensemble cast. Really liked it a lot. Now a pretty dark and ominous movie called Martha, Marcy, May, Marlene. It was directed by a guy named Sean Durkin, who might direct the adaptation of Little House on the Prairie. There might actually be, this is something I read about a while back, so it may not be happening anymore, but I read that this guy was going to do a feature film based on Little House on the Prairie, and I'm like, well, that's interesting. How are they going to handle that? How is this guy going to handle that? That'll be cool. This is the movie that pretty much introduced Elizabeth Olsen to the world. Elizabeth Olsen, of course, went on to star in the remake of Godzilla from a couple years ago, and she also, of course, plays Scarlet Witch now in the Marvel movies. Wasn't really aware of her prior to this. She's, of course, one of the sisters of the Olsen twins, Mary-Kate and Ashley. But yeah, she sort of established herself very nicely with this indie in which she plays a girl who used to be involved in this cult and has since managed to get out of it and is now back to living temporarily anyway with her older sister played by Sarah Paulson and her husband. And her behavior is really, really odd because she's used to behaving in a certain way and dealing with other people in a certain way. Given that she was in this cult that would like sort of share everything but also engage in some sinister activity involving breaking into people's homes and what have you, and they might have been responsible for a murder, and it's all just very, very tense and edgy. Really, really interesting movie, and an ending that just made me kind of go, what? Whoa, what's happening there? That's it's cool. I love it when that happens. It makes me kind of go, oh my god, that was the ending? Crazy. So now for another big change of pace. One movie, I had this little rule about not including sequels or franchise movies unless it was like the first installment could act as a standalone. And I'm not sure that this movie entirely qualifies because your appreciation of it will be increased by seeing a previous movie, but it isn't absolutely necessary. This movie is Rise of the Planet of the Apes. And this is a movie that, when I read about it, wasn't looking forward to at all. But when I saw the first trailer, I thought, hey, wow, that's pretty exciting. I'm on board. And it's a really, really entertaining movie. It's basically takes place in the present. We have some scientists who are working on a formula for making apes, primates, more intelligent. They play with the genetic code of a pregnant ape, and this affects her child. And she gives birth to Caesar, who is essentially the main character of the movie, despite the fact that he is not human. He's a primate. And of course, as he grows older, he's played in the performance capture role by Andy Serkis, who of course played Gollum. And I'm not telling you anything you don't already know. James Franco and Frida Pinto and David Oyelowo from Selma, they're all in this movie as well. The one complaint I have about this is that Caesar grows up over the course of about 8 years. And though he changes, he grows older, all the human beings in the movie, they don't change at all. Their hair doesn't change one little bit, they don't age a bit. Aside from that quibble, it's actually a really, really exciting movie. Tom Felton, of course, is in it as well, and Brian Cox. But the whole story involves Caesar figuring out that humans are never going to treat him as equally, and he wants to be treated equally because he is much smarter than most other primates, so he manages to dose all of the apes that he's held captive with, basically, and make them smarter, and they stage this elaborate escape, and they sort of invade San Francisco and and liberate all other apes. It's an exciting movie. It's lots and lots of fun. And of course it has a sequel, which was also really good, called Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. The director of this movie, Rise of the Planet of the Apes, is Rupert Wyatt, and I know that he's done something or is in the process of doing something, but I can't remember what it is off the top of my head. Sorry about that. Next, I'd like to talk about a drama called Young Adult, which was written by Diablo Cody, who also wrote the script for Juno, and was directed by Jason Reitman. This is my favorite film by Jason Reitman. He directed Juno as well. He did Up in the Air with George Clooney, of course, and recently he did a couple movies that weren't very well received. One was about the dangers of people who are paranoid about the internet. I know it wasn't technically about that, but that's really what I got from it. What was it called again? Men, Women, and Children. And there was another drama, I think it was called Labor Day, with Josh Brolin and Kate Winslet. Yeah, Young Adult is basically about a woman played by Charlize Theron, who's a writer, and she's like sort of a ghost writer in a young adult book series. The initial author of the first few books isn't writing them anymore, so there are other writers that are hired to take over for her with the series, and she really isn't sort of happy with her lot in life. She drinks a lot, and she writes occasionally, but then she finds out that her former boyfriend, played by Patrick Wilson, is getting married, or is expecting a child, actually, and she decides to sabotage his whole relationship, meet up with him, seduce him, take him away from all that because she wants him back, and it's just kind of, you know, a junk show, really. You know, she's really sort of what's the word I'm thinking of? Misguided, yes. She's terribly misguided. And along the way, she meets Patton Oswalt, another guy who she knew in high school, who actively discourages her from acting so selfishly. the mom from Twilight. What's the mom's name from Twilight? I can't remember her, but she's in the movie as well. She's a drummer, basically. She's Patrick Wilson's wife and the mother of his child, but she's also a drummer in her own all-female rock band, which is pretty cool. I like her a lot. I just wish I could... Elizabeth Reaser, that's her name. Elizabeth Reaser. I couldn't remember her name. But yeah, one of those movies that makes you go, gee, why is the movie about this particular person if they're so detestable? But it's actually a really good movie. I like it a lot. I've only seen it the one time, so it's one of those movies that it's on my list to see. I have to see that one again because it's really good. I have actively not tried to include too many Steven Soderbergh movies on these lists right here, because otherwise there would be one practically every single year. And anyone who's sort of following my recommendations would probably get sick of him, but there is one that I want to include on here, and that is, of course, Contagion, which is one of his biggest hits. A really, really exciting movie about a new viral outbreak that decimates a whole percentage of the Earth's population all over the world, spread, unfortunately, by Gwyneth Paltrow, who is Matt Damon's wife, and Matt Damon turns out to be immune, but he has to do everything he can to protect his daughter from getting infected. Meanwhile, you've got Lawrence Fishburne at the Center for Disease Control trying to figure out what to do about it, and you've got Jude Law as this video blogger who's talking about government conspiracies, perhaps unjustifiably. There's a whole sort of big ensemble cast. Marion Cotillard is in it as well. A lot of different people in different places dealing with the problem in whatever way they can. It's a good movie, really, really good movie. And most of Soderbergh's movies that I've seen over the last 20 years or so are good. A few duds, but most of them are good. I didn't want to spend half my time talking about Soderbergh, because that would be wrong. Finally, I'd like to talk about the very best movie that I saw in 2011, which was directed of all people by David Schwimmer. It's called Trust, and it's a drama about a father, played by Clive Owen, who discovers that his teenage daughter has been engaged in a relationship online with a sexual predator. Someone from a town somewhere in the United States. He's covered his tracks very well, but after this guy meets up with his daughter and abuses her and then takes off, they have a really, really tough time tracking him down, but also dealing with the emotional fallout. As I understand it, David Schwimmer did a lot of research and is sort of an active participant in helping child survivors of sexual abuse. So he really knows wherever he speaks, and this is a really, really good picture. Catherine Keener plays Clive Owen's wife, the girl's mother, and the girl is played by Liana Liberato, I think her name is. Anyway, she was the younger version of Michelle Monaghan in this Nicholas Sparks movie that came out last year called The Best of Me. But yeah, pretty powerful movie, and really the kind of thing that will set your teeth on edge, especially if you're sensitive about the subject matter, which, most people are. So that's 2011. Next video will be back in later this week, of course, is 2012, and I hope that you've enjoyed this, and I hope that you will leave me a comment, as some of you have been doing regularly. I appreciate that very much. Also, there's a link to my Facebook page below, and I should also mention that all these videos are on a playlist, so you can go back and look at any of them if you like, and the link to that is in the description below as well. Thank you very much for watching. Later.